I know what you're thinking. You probably thought you were going to get Joshua Juneau today. Instead, you got Miss Puff from SpongeBob. Just over here looking very puffy today.
I have noticed every time we go live, you have a comment about your head specifically. Last week, it was that you were a floating head, and this week that you were a puffy head.
Well, listen, what else are you seeing? I'm not showing you my hands.
Love yourself. Hi, Laura. All right. Welcome to the Morning Mint Friday edition, where we talk about the Hamptons and New York City rentals. And we have our panel of experts here, Mr. John Caulfield from Whitman Team Hamptons. Hi, John.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Miss Arielle Carraha, who is one of the most well-rounded agents I've ever met. Hello, Arielle. And Mr. Joshua Juneau, who's waiting to hear what I say about him. Mr. Joshua Juneau is able to talk himself out of and around of any situation, which makes him an incredible client advocate.
Ciao. Here I am.
Thanks, guys, for joining us. So we're going to jump right in with the Hamptons, John, if you're up to it. So the Real Deal reported that restaurants and retail in the Hamptons specifically are having trouble staffing their restaurants. Now, we've all been reading that this is a nationwide problem right now. And my question to you is, what do you know about this, and how much do you think this will affect whether people continue flocking to the Hamptons?
I don't think it's going to have a great effect on that. I think more than anything, maybe the quality of service could be affected. And unlike the city, I think it's less to do with unemployment, like the amount of money coming in. I think it's more to do with the housing. The employee housing is going up against the market, and they just don't have the money to pay for, like the usual cost to house their employees is just skyrocketed. And to go along with that, the construction out here is going berserk. So there's so many construction jobs that are much more lucrative than retail or restaurant jobs.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. How much of the economy in the Hamptons relies on restaurant and retail?
A huge part of it. But I know of two restaurants. One restaurant, they had to essentially pay full price on a full summer rental. They're a pop-up sushi restaurant, and they had to pay a large amount of money to employ their whole housing base. And then another pop-up restaurant, a delivery restaurant that had plans of opening up out here, and it wasn't cost effective to house their employees, so they decided against opening up. But all in all, though, I don't think we'll see the effect, but I think there is an underlying issue.
Well, that's interesting. So is it standard for employers in the Hamptons to house their employees?
If they're doing a pop-up for the summer, yeah.
Interesting.
But, yeah. I was just going to say, I think it can go both ways, but typically, like the summer-only restaurants or clubs, they will house their employees.
Interesting. What do you think is the reason why nationwide we're having issues staffing retail and restaurant?
Well, I think just the basic reason that you can make more money now working.
Yeah, well, this article actually mentioned a few. That is one reason, yes. This article mentioned what you said, lack of housing for these workers, and also that there are fewer seasonal international workers, which was something I hadn't considered. So that the H-2B visas, which are the temporary work visas for international non-agricultural workers, it caps at 66,000 every year, and we reached that cap back in February. So basically, these businesses aren't able to call upon these international workers that would normally come in for these seasonal jobs, which is just perpetuating the problem. Have you heard anything about that?
I actually haven't, but I will say that I believe that would be an issue because a lot of the restaurants out here are staffed by international workers. So I could see that if they don't win that lottery and they don't get those workers, that it could only add to the existing problem.
Yeah, I was looking at retail space here in Georgia this weekend, and the the Downtown Development Authority, who was showing me these spaces, actually mentioned the same issue. And it's interesting because I'm looking in small town Georgia, where this is the same issue that we're having in the Hamptons up in New York. Arielle and Josh, you both have ties to other tourist destinations. Arielle, Philly, Josh, Destin, Florida. Do you know of these issues there as well?
Definitely. Arielle, you want to go first?
No.
Oh. Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm from a very large, a large influx of summer and spring tourism is what really what really keeps the population of Destin like alive, or even on off season. We have a lot of workers that come from Europe who are here on visas, like you mentioned, who work at a lot of the restaurants, who are helping out, jobs from busing to doing food running to even waiting. We have also college faith-based councils that send their students to Destin, not for outreach and missionary trips, more so just for also kind of helping out and doing more public service styled help, cleaning up parks, cleaning up beaches. And a lot of those are not coming this year. So we're not seeing the Cleo kids coming to Destin to help clean up the beaches after tourism. So tourists, pick up after yourself. We're not seeing a lot of the people who are working in the food industry coming to help out with expediting or food busing. So how is that going to play a role into what the summer is going to look like? I guess really just give a lot of the service-based industries, give them grace. If you're going out for a meal, still tip well, even if you didn't have the best service, because again, it's a privileged sheet out right now.
That's a good point, Josh. Arielle, do you have any comment on what's going on in Philly?
Hard to really say. I think, it's one of the fifth or sixth largest cities in the country. So, my understanding as of recently was that the state of Pennsylvania was having some issues with their unemployment. So if I had to guess, I think a lot more people are probably going back to work and not having as many restaurant staffing or retail staffing issues as maybe more of a destination place like Destin or the Hamptons.
Yeah, it's a good point. This is definitely something we're going to continue talking about in following weeks. So everybody read up on it so we can keep talking about it for our viewers. Moving on. So Behind the Hedges reports, this is really, really interesting. So Behind the Hedges reports that Suffolk County purchased a historic 11-acre farm in Aquaboc, Long Island. I'm sure I didn't say that right. That's about 20 miles outside of the Hamptons. So the county purchased the property in their Suffolk County Farmland Protection Program, which has amassed 11,000 acres of protected land, so land that cannot be developed in Suffolk County. And I think this is interesting because back in January, President Biden signed an executive order called 30 by 30. And it's that 30% of U.S. land and waterways will be preserved by 2030. And I think there's an inherent kind of misalignment between land development and land preservation. And right now what we're seeing with prices skyrocketing because of lack of lumber and lack of land is that people don't have places to live. So, John, costs to build and buy homes are skyrocketing. Land conservation, land development are at odds. In the Hamptons, are you seeing or have you heard about any clashes between land development and land conservation?
So not exactly like a first-hand story, but it is an age-old battle here between land preservation and developers. And when you buy in the Hamptons, the transfer tax on the buy side, the 2% transfer tax goes to the Peconic Bay tax, and the Peconic Bay Land Trust goes around and they purchase wetlands, farms, open spaces, and they'll even purchase homes. And just to preserve, like if they're located on water somewhere, or they have, for many different reasons. But the Hamptons, I think, is one of the more stronger battles between land preservation and developers.
Arielle, what do you think about this? Where are people going to live?
I don't know where people are going to live, and I think to a degree that's okay. I think that Long Island is a really beautiful place, and there's enough or there was enough room for people to vacation there, but there also needs to be some room to preserve land. So I'm not mad at it.
Josh?
Listen, I'll be honest, and I think differently than a lot of people. I think that lumber went up because TikTok DIY became such a huge thing. I'm on that TikTok like restoration, and lumber is expensive. I wanted to build a floating shelf in my apartment, and I realized I could build or buy a West Elm floating shelf for cheaper than it cost me to build one. So I think that you're asking where people are going to live. They're going to live in existing houses that are already there, and like Arielle said, I'm hoping there's going to be a share of wealth. So maybe larger areas that have always been very vastly populated are going to become less populated. And then the smaller areas that weren't so populated, they're going to see a moment where they're going to have an opportunity to bring in tourism this year, bring in new renters this year. So we'll see.
You heard it here first, everyone. TikTok is driving up the price of lumber. Hey,
Listen,
nobody would be surprised, honestly.
I'm not surprised, and I said it.
Thank you, John. Let's move on to New York City rentals. And this is actually a more broad topic for rentals, not just New York City first, but May becomes one of the best months for rent collection during the pandemic. So what that means is more people are paying their rent. And what I read is that over the course of the pandemic, about 75% of people paid their rent every month by the 6th of the month. That's jumped to 80%. That might not seem like a huge jump, but when you look at the raw numbers, we're talking about I think it was 11 million people surveyed. That's a big difference. So my question to Arielle is, I read, so first confirm whether this is accurate or not. I read that last week a federal judge tossed out the eviction ban that's been in place since last year that was helping with financially struggling renters with the economic fallout. Do you think that landlords got a ton of rent checks the next day?
No. I think tenants are more savvy than they've been probably ever. And they know that eviction courts are backed up and that it's going to take a really long time to get anybody out right now. Mm-hmm. So if you weren't paying before, you're probably not paying now.
Is that true? Have you read anything about the eviction ban being lifted?
So I read about it on a federal level, but has it trickled down on the state level? I haven't seen it. I spoke to two litigating attorneys earlier this week who said that they had virtual court and that 30 of 35 of their cases were adjourned until September 1st, which is technically when the moratorium was supposed to be lifted. So I don't know, maybe the word just hasn't been spread enough, but I don't know enough about it. No.
Interesting. So September 1st sounds like the date that we're looking towards. What happens on September 1st? The eviction ban is lifted. All of these people have not paid rent for the past 3, 6, 12 months. What happens to those people? Do they have a window of opportunity to pay that rent, or is it just we're going through proceedings now?
Well, I think it depends on what a landlord has done up until that point. New York State passed a law, I think last year, where you have to give 30, 60, or 90 days, depending on how long the tenant has actually lived there, a notice to vacate. So you have to do that first, and then, once that time has passed, you can actually start the eviction process. So I think that it really just depends on the specific situation, but right. From what I have heard, eviction court is extremely backed up right now. So, even getting your case there, I think is still going to take an incredible amount of time to get anything done. So probably best that you work something out with your tenant for finding a way to get paid and not having to evict.
Right. Josh, you represent a ton of landlords. Have you heard anything about this federal ruling and or whether your landlords are saying that they're receiving rent payments more often and more fully?
Yeah, no, it's been a continuing conversation because, you can't be reactive in these situations. Nothing just happens overnight. Even if things were to be lifted, like Arielle said, we're three months just to get in court, 3 months of court processing. It's a long time. A lot of owners are trying to work with tenants. There's a lot of, I think, just bad literature that was coming out. No reason to name what news publications were doing it, but articles that had flashy names like "don't have to pay rent," "stop paying your rent," "rent freeze," and a lot of people just didn't really know what that meant. So I think owners now are trying to have a more open, casual dialogue. But let's not get this twisted. Rent is not just lining the pockets of these like billionaire landlords. Not every landlord owns big portfolios. Some landlords are small family owned businesses that have owned it for multiple years that if you're not paying rent, they're coming out of pocket. And additionally, in New York City specifically, for New York City, well, New York City specifically, but also New York State, a large portion of rent goes towards property taxes for building. Property taxes for buildings pays for a lot of what New York City benefits from: schooling, public libraries, municipal services, sanitation services. Like, it's not just rents lining pockets of landlords. So when people are holding out on paying rent to their owners, owners are still having to pay that property tax. Property tax is still being used to pay for these services. So it's got a huge trickle down effect. So when people are paying rent, it's not just like stick it to the landlord. Landlords are people too. Yes, some landlords are scumlords. I'm not going to disagree with that. But not all landlords out there are here to take your money and run. Certain people are having to come out of pocket. We're all in a pandemic. This is together we can shoot the moon, fight the rain, even ride a hurricane if you want to cheat a girl's moment. Like, we need to be here for each other. So I'm going to say this one last time. If you have the ability to pay your rent, please pay your rent. Like, this isn't just a matter of like ethics. This is a matter of we as a city have to work together to make sure that our services and what keeps our city great and clean is still able to be provided.
That's a really great point. What I don't hear very often. John, I'm guessing that this is not a conversation happening in the Hamptons, right?
Well, not necessarily. Last year, there was a lot of squatters here, probably more than ever. Or it was actually the first year really ever occurred. So it was an issue here. Not with 1 month rentals, obviously, because they paid up front. But if you had a 3 month rental and you had to collect July and August, that's where the issues came.
Wow. Interesting and surprising. We're going to move on to our next topic. So New York's rent relief site went live. New York just released information on the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And this program will basically pay back rent that hasn't been paid for up to 12 months. Arielle, I have a lot of questions about this. Who receives this rent payment? Is that going directly to the tenant or directly to the landlord? Do we have enough information on this yet for even to be a conversation?
So with New York State, I think it's still really unclear, especially since you can't actually submit an application right now. I have a tenant in Philadelphia who has asked that I sign up. And when I was signing up, they asked for my bank information. So my understanding is that you get the back owed rent, but for utilities, I actually don't know how that works.
Oh, really interesting. So, Josh, the timing of this is a little serendipitous. So we just discussed how the eviction ban was tossed, at least on the federal level, from what we understand. What can renters expect from do you have anything about the federal ruling that you know that's going to impact renters moving forward?
Yeah, much like
specifically about the renter assistance program.
Yeah, much like Arielle said, if we can look at what's happening now, I mean, this is a new system. This isn't something that's like a huge concept that we're all going to have a lot of information or that we're all privy to. It's going to be very much user case. We're going to hear a lot more stories coming out in the news of what people's experiences have been. But I mean, if we look at new things happening here in the city, it's going to take a while. Look at getting vaccinations here in the city and how convoluted that was to even try to just get an appointment set up. Anything that's going to happen with rent relief, it's going to take some due diligence. They're going to have to look into your situation. They're going to have to speak with your owner. None of this is going to be a fast-moving process. Anything that passes, it's not like today rent relief, tomorrow here's your check. So much like how Arielle had to sign up, talk with them independently, it's going to be some back end on the owner. It's going to be some back end on the tenant. And I think that if all of New York is rushing to this website, which I think a lot of New Yorkers will be, I think it's going to have opportunities for it to crash, much like it did whenever we had people signing up for unemployment. So I think everything just needs to happen in the time that it can, which is going to be a slower pace. So don't stress. And ideally, if you are a renter really looking to utilize this program, have conversations with your owner sooner than later about it. Have they heard about it? What will they be doing with it? And talk to as many people as you can, because I think that it's going to be a very the spread is going to be very word of mouth, more so than it's going to be publication.
You made a good point, Josh, that somebody needs to claim onus of this. And while landlords, of course, are collecting these payments, I do think the one piece of advice we can give to any tenants that are going to utilize this program is take responsibility for it, put the onus on yourself, and make sure that you're doing the research to potentially bypass any potential evictions in the future.
I would even say, even one little addition to that is that don't just have conversations with your friends. And I'm not saying this as a plug to talk with a broker or work with a broker, but real estate is not just like a very much like, we're in a Google generation. It's very easy to Google things and just look up and try to get the response that you want. But there's so many moving pieces to this, moving parts. And I do think that listing agents are going to hear a lot more of the one side of a story. And I think that tenant representative agents are going to hear the other side of the story. And I think that we're going to really have to bridge a narrative. So if you don't have a broker that you're working with, or if you don't know a broker, reach out to myself, Arielle, John, reach out to anyone at Triple Mint, reach out to somebody, because I do think that this is not going to be an easy thing for anyone to do on their own. I really don't.
Great point. Always work with an agent. So let's move on to Josh, while we have you. What's going on in the New York City rental market right now? What do tenants who are looking for places need to know?
That's a great question. I think that we have come to a very, like I said, in New York City, we've been very reactive during this pandemic. I mean, honestly, we've just been figuring out as we go. We've been doing crazy discount metrics, but not ones that we've been able to really watch and see how patterns have been forming. I talked about this earlier. There's just been a share of wealth within the seasonality of when people move, who's moving, and why they're moving. Typically, we've seen that New York's highest rental season has been from April until September, and that crowded movement has always really created a landlord's market. Landlords can get what they want. They can get the rents they want. They can really take the applications that they want. We have more inventory than we've ever had, but just because we have more doesn't mean that we have better. So something to keep in mind when working and moving in New York City, I still think you need to be proactive and pragmatic about the search. With a lot of inventory becomes a lot of time in due diligence, a lot of time to look around, see apartments, going out on multiple tours. I think now more than ever, you want to use an agent. And again, this isn't just Joshua's plug for using an agent. This is just Joshua's plug for doing things smartly and not hard. Smartly, LOL.
You heard it first, everyone. Smartly.
Okay, listen, it's going to end up in some dictionary, probably just mine. No, but this is a time that you really want to take time to understand that if you want a good deal, great deals are out there. Good deals can cloud up a great deal. So if you're looking to find something very specific, give yourself more time to find it. Don't just try to find it within a weekend's time, because I think it's very exciting, the market that we're in. It's a lot more affordable for people. It's a lot more robust for people. You're not having to take one of the 3 apartments you're seeing or one of the 9 apartments you're seeing. You could see 38 apartments. But is it worth your time to see 38? Probably not. So again, this is a very much a work smarter, not harder situation.
Thanks, Josh. John, Hamptons rentals. If we wanted
it's also a landlord's market out here.
Yeah, if we wanted a summer rental in the Hamptons, what's that going to cost us?
Well, there is no inventory. I mean, to give an example, we listed a $150,000 July rental last week, which is pretty late in the year for a rental that high. And we got 4 full price offers within 4 days.
Wow.
There's absolutely nothing from the bottom of the barrel to the top to the most expensive. There's not much out there.
Wow.
So basically what you're saying is if you're looking for a summer rental in the Hamptons, don't.
Right.
No, you can. Just don't expect a lot of options.
Got it. Thanks. Let's wrap up with some events. Arielle, John, what's going on in New York City? What's going on in the Hamptons in this next week that our viewers should know about?
Surf Lodge is opening up in Montauk, which is kind of big because last year they really weren't open at all except for hotel guests. Supposedly they're opening up in a more civilized manner this year, I guess, where it's not what it used to be, but they are opening up.
All right.
Wait, also, I'm going to call you out real quick, Austin. Austin and I, during that Surf Lodge comment, Austin and I both were like, oh, nice. We don't know what that is. We've never been there. I don't know what they serve. The closest we've gotten to Montauk is at the Target grocery store when we're buying the Montauk beer. So we're like, Surf Lodge, yes.
That is not true. I spent the summer in the Hamptons last year, Joshua.
Arielle, what else is happening?
the
But you're right. I don't know.
Philharmonic.
I don't know anything about Surf Shop. But it sounds like you
Surf
can't
Lodge.
go live in the Hamptons during the summer. But if you wanted to take a day trip out there to go to Surf Shop, you now can. Surf
It's
Lodge.
the lodge.
Lodge.
Surf Lodge.
He's over here saying it's called Billabong. He's like, if you want to go over to Pac Sun.
Oh, Arielle, what's going on in New York City?
Philharmonic is back. Very cool for nerds like me. And Lincoln Center has a new lawn greenery situation that I believe Josh went to yesterday, the day before, which is supposed to be really, really cool.
Very cool.
And you can now drink at bars again, guys. Like I went to a bar and sat at a bar yesterday, so everyone should partake and get in on that.
Now back to the Lincoln Center lawn. I did see on our co-founder's Instagram yesterday. It looked as if he was at the Lincoln Center lawn playing with sheep puppets. Is that something you can find at this lawn?
I think so. Sheep puppets and real dogs, from what I have seen on our co-founder's Instagram. So,
well, I think the dog was his, but yes. Thank you very much, Arielle, Josh, John. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into The Morning Mint. We will be back next Friday. The Morning Mint, though, is every Monday morning at 8 a.m. with different co-hosts and different panels. So please tune in and learn about what's going on in real estate. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Ciao for now.